My name is Emily, and I'm known around town as a reliable delivery driver who always gets your order to your doorstep on time. The hum of the engine, the rhythm of the streets, I've come to find comfort in the routine of it all. But that day, the day that changed everything, began just like any other. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the city streets, I received a notification on my delivery app. It was my last assignment for the day, a final delivery to a remote part of town. The address seemed unfamiliar, nestled in the corner of the city I rarely ventured to. A chill ran down my spine, an inkling of unease tugging at my thoughts, but dismissing it as my imagination. I revved the engine and headed towards the destination, the uncertainty lingering in the back of my mind. The city lights painted streaks of color across the pavement as I navigated the streets, my headlights piercing the encroaching darkness. The address led me to a quiet cul-de-sac where houses stood like silent sentinels against the night. The house at the end of the road stood out, not just because it seemed isolated, but because it exuded an unsettling aura. Still, I had a job to do, and I approached the door with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. I rang the doorbell. Its chime echoing through the stillness. The door creaked open, revealing a man standing there, his expression devoid of emotion. He was tall, wearing a plain suit that seemed almost too perfect, like a costume. His eyes were unsettlingly calm as they met mine, and a chill shot down my spine. "Delivery," I managed to say, my voice a touch shakier than I would have liked. "Ah, yes," he replied, his voice smooth and measured. "Please come in." Reluctantly, I stepped over the threshold, the door closing behind me with an ominous finality. The interior of the house was dimly lit, shadows dancing across the walls like restless spirits. The man motioned for me to follow, leading me through a hallway adorned with peculiar paintings and odd artifacts. My senses were on high alert, the unease growing stronger with each step. We reached a room, and he gestured for me to wait. The room was adorned with more strange objects, and as I looked around, I caught sight of a door that seemed out of place. Curiosity got the better of me, and I pushed it open, revealing a room unlike anything I could have anticipated. The room was a macabre display, a shrine of darkness. Photographs, newspaper clippings, and chilling trophies adorned the walls, a grim testament to the man's twisted activities. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the magnitude of what I had stumbled upon. This man was no ordinary customer. He was something far more sinister. Fear prickled at the edges of my consciousness, and I felt a wave of panic threatening to overtake me. But I had to keep my composure. My instincts screamed at me to get out, to run, but I couldn't let on that I knew his secret. My life depended on it. With a deep breath, I backed away from the room, my heart pounding as I forced myself to remain calm. Outside, the sun had set completely, and the darkness had taken over the world. Little did I know that the real darkness was just beginning to reveal itself. I returned to the main room, my heart racing as I tried to process what I had just seen. The man, whom I now knew as Mr. Jensen, appeared with a pleasant smile that sent shivers down my spine. It was as if he knew that I had discovered his hidden room, and yet he maintained an air of calm. "Is everything to your liking?" he inquired, his tone eerily polite. I forced a nod, my mind racing as I struggled to act normal. "Yes, everything's fine." As I watched him, I realized that I had stumbled into something far darker than I could ever imagined. This wasn't just a routine delivery. Mr. Jensen's demeanor was a facade, masking a sinister reality. The symbols on the walls, the strange artifacts, they hinted at a world of darkness that I was now a part of, whether I wanted to be or not. I had to think fast. I couldn't let Mr. Jensen know that I had uncovered his secret. My fingers clenched around the delivery bag, and I forced a smile. "I'll just need your signature," please?" As he signed the receipt, his eyes lingered on mine for a moment too long. It was as if he was peering into my very soul, as if he could sense that I knew more than I should. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a reminder of the danger I was in. I practically sprinted back to my delivery vehicle, my thoughts racing as I tried to make sense of what I had just experienced. I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was in grave danger. Mr. Jensen was not just a normal customer, he was a serial killer, and I had inadvertently stumbled upon his gruesome collection of trophies. Sitting in my vehicle, I took a moment to compose myself. I knew I had to act quickly. I grabbed my phone and discreetly snapped photos of the room. The symbols, the trophies, anything that could serve as evidence. If I didn't make it out of this alive, at least there would be some record of what Mr. Jensen had done. My hands trembled as I sent the photos to a friend of mine who worked in law enforcement. I typed a frantic message, explaining the situation and pleading for help. I knew I couldn't rely solely on the police. I needed a plan of my own. As I waited for a response, I realized that time was not on my side. Mr. Jensen was about to commit his final murder, and if I didn't do something, I might become his next victim. My heart raced as I weighed my options. I needed to gather more evidence, find a way to turn the tables on him, and bring him to justice before it was too late. With a determined breath, I put my plan into motion. I had stumbled into a nightmare, but I was determined to fight my way out of it. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the adrenaline-fueled determination that surged through me. I wasn't going to let Mr. Jensen get away with his heinous crimes. I was going to ensure that justice was served, even if it meant putting my own life on the line. All of a sudden, the glass window of my car broke, and I saw Mr. Jensen standing there. Before I could react, he hit my head with something sharp, and everything blacked out. My name is Jake, and I've always found a sense of freedom in the city streets, zipping through traffic on my trusty delivery bike. People know me as a guy who's always on time, the one who can navigate even the most labyrinthine streets without breaking a sweat. But there's something about the night that changes everything. The city's vibrant energy fades into shadows, and an unsettling aura takes its place. When the night falls, I take on a series of orders, each one landing me to different corners of the city. But it's that one delivery, the one with the ominous address, that marks the beginning of the chilling encounters that would follow. The address is for an apartment building in a part of town that seems frozen in time. The windows are dark, and the only light comes from the flickering street lamp nearby. A shiver runs down my spine as I approach, a feeling that's hard to shake off. I remind myself that's just my imagination getting the best of me, that there's nothing more to it than a routine delivery. I park my bike and grab the package, ascending the cracked concrete steps that lead to the building's entrance. The hallway is dimly lit, the air heavy with a musty scent that seems to linger in old places like this. With each step, my unease grows, a feeling that's hard to explain. I reach the door, knock, and wait for what feels like an eternity. Just as I'm about to leave the package by the door, I catch a glimpse of something from the corner of my eye. I turn my head, and there, in the shadows, I see him. A distinct figure with eyes that seem to pierce through the darkness. It's like he's been waiting for me, watching my every move. My heart races, a cold sweat forming on my brow as I try to make sense of what I'm seeing. But in an instant, he's gone, disappearing into the night like a wisp of smoke. I take a shaky breath, my mind racing with questions. Who was he? What did he want? The encounter was unsettling to say the least, and as I head back to my bike, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. I try to brush it off, chalking it up to nerves of exhaustion. But deep down, a gnawing sense of unease takes root. Little did I know that this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would unravel my sense of reality. Over the next few days, the memory of the encounter lingers like a shadow in the back of my mind. I continue with my deliveries, trying to regain the confidence I've always had on the streets. But it's different now. The bustling city feels like a maze, and every corner holds a potential threat. The encounters with the mysterious figure become more frequent. Sometimes he's just a fleeting shadow at the edge of my vision. Other times, he's standing across the street, staring at me with those piercing eyes that seem to see right through me. It's as if he's playing a twisted game, always staying just out of reach. As I recount the strange events to a friend, they dismiss it as a result of stress or lack of sleep. But I know better. I know what I saw, and I can't ignore the growing feeling of dread that accompanies each encounter. I feel like a haunted animal, always on the edge, never knowing when he'll show up next. The encounters escalate, becoming more direct and unsettling. He leaves cryptic notes in the packages I deliver, taunting me with his knowledge of my movements. The notes are vague, filled with enigmatic phrases that send a chill down my spine. I'm no longer sure if he's after me, or if he's simply trying to drive me mad. Sleep becomes a distant memory as paranoia takes hold. I catch glimpses of him in mirrors, across crowded streets, even outside my apartment window. He's always there, watching, waiting. My nerves are on edge. My confidence is shattered. Every knock on the door, every flickering street lamp, sets my heart racing. I try to piece together who he might be, but there's nothing that connects us. No shared history, no reason for his relentless pursuit. I'm trapped in a waking nightmare, and I can't find a way out. The notes become more sinister, hinting at a shared past that I can't remember. Memories that should be familiar are shrouded in darkness, and the stalker seems to delight in my confusion. I find myself retracing my steps, trying to uncover the truth that he claims to know. My performance at work suffers as I'm consumed by this obsession. I pore over old photos and dig through forgotten memories, desperate to find a clue that will lead me to the truth. The city that once felt like home now feels like a prison. Every corner a potential trap. The city's energy has transformed into a suffocating weight, and I find myself longing for the anonymity of the open road. But even there, he follows. I can't escape him. No matter how hard I try, I follow the breadcrumbs he leaves, a desperate attempt to confront him and end this nightmare. The trail leads me to an abandoned building, a decaying shell that mirrors my own sense of unease. The air is heavy with anticipation as I step inside, the darkness swallowing me whole. In the heart of the building, I finally come face to face with him. The enigmatic figure steps out of the shadows, his features illuminated by a single, flickering light. The truth is revealed, an incident from our shared past, one that I had buried deep within my memory. His eyes burn with a mix of rage and pain, and I realized that this pursuit was never about me. It was about him seeking revenge for the pain I had unknowingly caused. As he speaks, his words resonate with a twisted logic that chills me to the bone. The confrontation escalates, tension thick in the air. It's a battle of wills, a clash of emotions that has been years in the making. But as the building trembles around us, I realize that this is my chance to end the cycle of fear and revenge, to break free from the darkness that has consumed us both. With a final surge of adrenaline, I manage to outsmart him, escape the crumbling building, and survive the encounter. The truth is out, but the scars remain. As I walk away from the wreckage, I can't help but feel a lingering unease. The city may have returned to its usual rhythm, but I know that I'll never truly escape the shadows that have taken root within me. I decided that I won't ever do the delivery job again, and got on my bike. As soon as I started the bike, I felt a sharp pain in my stomach when I looked down. When I looked down, there was a knife struck into my stomach, and blood was coming out. In less than a minute, I started feeling dizzy and fell onto the ground. My name is Alex, and I've always prided myself on being a dedicated and hardworking delivery driver. It's a simple job, but it pays the bills, and I enjoy the freedom it gives me as I cruise through the quiet suburban streets. On an ordinary day, I received a delivery request that would turn my world upside down. The app pinged with the details: a remote house at the end of Elm Street. The sun was setting, casting long shadows that stretched across the pavement. As I parked in front of the house, I couldn't shake off a sense of unease. The place looked more than just secluded. It looked downright eerie. Still, orders were orders, and I grabbed the bag, my instincts on high alert. I walked up the cracked pathway to the porch, the floorboards creaking beneath my steps. The house had seen better days, its paint chipped and windows dirty. I rang the doorbell, and the man opened the door with a warm smile. That was Mr. Reynolds, the customer on the other end of this delivery. He was tall and had an odd aura about him, pleasant yet slightly unsettling. "Hey there," he said, his voice smooth as he took the bag from my hands. "Just give me a moment to grab the cash." I nodded, my polite smile masking the uneasiness I felt. As I stood there, waiting, I heard faint, muffled cries coming from inside the house. My heart raced, and my mind conjured up all sorts of scenarios. Was it just my imagination, or was something seriously wrong? The door suddenly swung open, and before I could react, Mr. Reynolds lunged at me. I barely had time to process what was happening before everything went black. When I came to, I found myself in a dimly lit basement, my wrists bound tightly with coarse rope. Panic surged through me as I struggled against my restraints, only to realize I was not alone. Across from me was another captive, a young woman named Sarah. Her eyes were haunted, and her voice trembled as she explained that she had been trapped here for weeks. She told me about Mr. Reynolds' twisted games and his obsession with his victims, turning them into pieces of his disturbing art. Days turned into nights as Sarah and I tried to make sense of our situation. Mr. Reynolds would visit us, a sinister grin on his face, forcing us to participate in his sick games. We had to pretend to be characters from his twisted stories, to act out scenes that he found amusing. Every refusal, every hint of defiance, was met with his chilling threats. As I lay on the cold, hard floor during those moments of solitude, I examined every nook and cranny of the basement. My fingers brushed against a loose brick in the wall, and my heart raced with hope. There were subtle clues here, hidden in plain sight, clues that might just be the key to our escape. Sarah and I spent sleepless nights piecing together the subtle hints we'd found. We discovered a message etched into the basement wall, a desperate plea from a previous victim who had tried to escape but failed. The message hinted at a hidden tunnel that might lead us out of this hellish place. With newfound determination, we began to formulate our escape plan, connecting with the other captives through whispered conversations and coded signals. As we shared our stories and skills, we realized that we were not alone in this nightmare. Among the captives was Ben, a wiry man with shifty eyes. At first, we were hesitant to trust him, but as he shared his own story of survival, we saw a glimmer of redemption in him. Ben revealed that he had been manipulated by Mr. Reynolds and, in a surprising turn, pledged to help us take him down. The night of the escape arrived, tense and suffused with fear. We coordinated our movements, each of us playing a vital role in the plan. With Ben's knowledge of the basement's layout and my knack for puzzles, we felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could break free from this nightmare. But the best laid plans don't always go as expected. As we neared the moment of escape, the basement door swung open, revealing Mr. Reynolds standing there, a malevolent grin twisting his lips. It was as if he had sensed our intentions. Chaos erupted as we lunged at him, fighting to overpower him and finally gain our freedom. In the midst of the struggle, a single gunshot rang out, the deafening sound echoing the cramped space. I felt a searing pain, a white-hot flash that soared through my side. I collapsed to the ground, clutching the wound, my vision blurring as the room spun around me. The struggle continued, a whirlwind of shouts and grunts, as Ben and the others fought to overpower Mr. Reynolds. Through the haze of pain, I saw Sarah, her face a mask of determination, her eyes locked on our captor. The tides shifted, and Mr. Reynolds was finally subdued. As the room fell into an eerie silence, the realization of what had happened washed over us. Blood pooled around me, and darkness threatened to claim my consciousness. Through the maze, I saw Sarah rushing to my side, her voice a desperate plea as she tried to keep me awake. I woke up in a sterile hospital room, the antiseptic smell mingling with the distant echoes of that night. The wound had been severe, but I had survived. Sarah sat by my bedside, her eyes red from tears shed and sleepless nights. She filled in the details. The police had arrived, apprehended Mr. Reynolds, and saved us from the nightmare. As I looked at Sarah, I realized the bond we had formed. We were survivors, connected by the horrors we had endured. Ben had disappeared that night, leaving behind an uncertain legacy. The scars were not just physical, they ran deep within us, shaping our paths moving forward. The room darkened as the sun set outside, casting long shadows that stretched across the walls. Sarah held my hand, a silent understanding passing between us. We had faced the abyss together and emerged on the other side, forever changed by the ordeal. And as the room grew darker, I held on to the glimmer of hope, a testament to our resilience. It took me a couple of weeks to heal up, but I never took a job that involved delivering things to people's houses. This incident had traumatized me for my entire life. Chills run down my spine whenever I think about what could have happened if we couldn't get out.